Have you ever imagined that your docile, unremarkable wife, the one who cooks a warm meal on time every single day and never raises her voice, might one day make you tremble with absolute terror? That day, I was looking at my wife as she stood in the kitchen with her back to me, silently preparing dinner. Steam was rising steadily from the stove. She turned around and smiled at me. It was a completely ordinary, everyday moment, but a sudden chill ran down my spine. It was not because she had done anything overtly terrifying. It was because of a discovery I had just made. It was a tangible piece of evidence that proved I had not known my wife's true nature for the past 3 years. For 3 years, living under the exact same roof, I had never truly looked at her. In hindsight, I had been living with my eyes stitched shut. Whenever I came home late from the office in downtown Chicago, my wife was always awake, waiting for me. She would ask just one question before quietly heading to the bedroom. "Have you had dinner?" That was it. There was no further conversation. I would give a half-hearted reply or completely ignore her, climb into bed, and turn my back to her. When I woke up the next morning, breakfast would already be set on the dining table. My dress shirts for work would be crisply ironed, and the house was always spotless without a speck of dust. For 3 years, I conducted my affairs with a brazen disregard for her. I left the house early, came home late, and sometimes did not even bother to call or text for days. Yet, my wife never once showed jealousy, resentment, or anger. Not even once. It got to the point where I audaciously brought my mistress right up to our driveway, laughing and making a scene late at night. My wife simply looked down at us from the kitchen window, then lowered her head and went back to whatever she was doing. Honestly, it was convenient, but at the same time, it made me sick. Why did she not make a scene? Why did she not throw things and scream? Why did she not hurl insults and take her anger out on me? She was too quiet. I even started to think she was a human being, void of emotion, merely a shadow cast against the wall. To me, her presence or absence made no difference whatsoever. Yes, I know I am absolute garbage, but I rationalized it by telling myself that this is just how men are. As long as she welcomed me when I got home and had a hot meal ready, that was enough. I had arrogantly granted myself that entitlement. However, there was one chilling detail I had remained completely oblivious to for 3 years. Thinking about it now makes my blood run cold. Whenever I walked into a room, my wife's gaze was never actually fixed on me. It was not an angry or sulking look. Instead, her eyes would pass right through me, staring into the empty space behind my shoulder as if she were looking at an inanimate object or a moving piece of furniture. It was the same when we ate. She would sit across from me, serve me a portion of pot roast, and smile with her lips, but her eyes were entirely dead. That smile always appeared with the clinical precision of an automated machine deployed with pinpoint accuracy. I clearly remember the day I boldly announced I was taking a weekend trip to Maui with my mistress. My wife just nodded and asked if I needed help packing my suitcase. Her voice was as calm as if she were asking what I wanted for lunch. I stayed in Hawaii for a whole week, but I did not receive a single missed call or text message from her. That fact relieved me, yet it also deeply unsettled me. When I finally returned, the front door was unlocked. A hot dinner was on the table, and my wife was sitting in her usual spot. She looked up and asked how the trip was. "Yeah, it was fun," I replied dismissively, turning on the TV to watch Sunday night football. She cleared the dishes in silence. I could hear the clinking of plates from the kitchen. I did not look at her, and I did not ask what she had been up to while I was gone, not even once. Now, facing the horrific truth, a memory of a certain early morning suddenly resurfaces. I had come home completely wasted, soaked to the bone from a sudden downpour. My wife was sitting alone in the pitch-black living room, staring out the window. All the lights were off. The TV was off. Her phone was nowhere to be seen. She was just sitting there like a ghost in the dark. Startled, I asked why she was not asleep yet. She slowly turned her head, smiled, and said she just really loved the sound of the rain. I did not ask any more questions. I collapsed into bed and passed out. Now I ask myself, during all those long dark nights, sitting alone and staring out the window, was she listening to the things I had never once bothered to hear? What was she thinking about during those endless hours? Was she crying? Was she furious? Or was she meticulously planning something? I started tracing back through my memories. Every morning at 5 a.m., she woke up to brew coffee, fry bacon, and slow cook a roast for dinner. I never once asked if she was tired. I just ate and left for work. Even on the days she was sick, she would force herself out of bed to cook. One time, I complained that the chicken noodle soup was too bland. She did not say a word, she just took the bowl back to the kitchen, adjusted the seasoning, and brought it back. Not a single complaint. Once I saw her sitting at the table, pale-faced, holding a hand to her forehead. When I asked if she was feeling sick, she looked startled and quickly dropped her hand, claiming it was just a mild cold. But the most terrifying detail was that she never once refused me in the bedroom. No matter how much like trash I treated her, she was always submissive whenever I demanded it. One night, she felt like a moving corpse. She squeezed her eyes shut and bit her lip hard. I hated the look on her face, but I did not stop. I thought it was my right. Now I realize it was not submission. It was endurance. It was a horrifying, limitless threshold of patience with no end in sight. For 3 years, I lived with this woman without ever asking what she liked, what she wanted, or what she feared. I had no idea who her friends were, where she went during the day, or what went through her mind. We had never gone to a movie theater together. I had never bought her a birthday present. We had never held hands walking down the street. All I knew was that she was a great cook, kept the house immaculate, and absolutely never bothered me. I thought that was a good thing. I was completely wrong. From the very first day she crossed the threshold of this house to become my wife, I was dead wrong. Looking back, I was a pathetic excuse for a human being, entirely unqualified to be a husband or a father. And now her silence was starting to terrify me. Because the day a woman who is so submissive she never fights back finally decides to rebel, she will make you pay a price so brutal you will not be able to endure it. An unimaginably steep price. For 3 years I was an arrogant traitor, and for 3 years my wife was an invisible woman. But right now I have just realized that her invisibility was the most horrifying thing of all. I had been completely clueless. In the silence she was watching everything. Perhaps she was preparing something. That day, I got into a huge argument with my mistress, Harper, right on the sidewalk. Harper threw a fit, and threatened to just go back to her own apartment. I knew that if I went to her place, I would have to spend hours groveling to fix her mood, and I was dead tired. So, I decided to bring Harper to my house. It was just for one night, and we would leave early for work the next morning. What did it matter if my wife was home? My wife was docile. She was not the type to ever dare talk back to me. I grabbed Harper by the hand and opened the front door. My heart beat a little faster, but I convinced myself it was fine. When I opened the door, the house was bathed in a warm yellow glow, and the delicious smell of a home-cooked meal drifted from the kitchen. Dinner was already laid out on the table. Glazed pork chops, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans, and rich brown gravy. The water in the small flower vase on the table had been freshly changed and droplets clung to the rose petals. It was so ordinary. It was so chillingly, suffocatingly ordinary. Just then, my wife walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an old floral apron. She looked at me, then looked at Harper. I froze, bracing myself for her to finally snap, but she did not. A faint smile appeared on her lips. She smiled at Harper. It was a polite, composed smile. "Good evening. Please come in. We were just about to eat, so let me go grab another plate for you." Her tone was so light and welcoming, as if she were greeting an old friend she had not seen in years. Harper hid behind my back, gripping my jacket tightly. I could feel her hot breath on my neck, and the air in the room suddenly felt as thick and heavy as mud. I stammered out an excuse. "Oh, this is Harper. She is a colleague from the firm. We just happened to drop by." My wife kept smiling and nodded. "I know. You know what the hell do you mean you know?" A sudden wave of goosebumps erupted across my skin, but before I had a second to process it, my wife went back into the kitchen, brought out another plate and silverware, and set a place at the table. Her hands moved swiftly, serving Harper a generous portion of mashed potatoes and placing the thickest, most perfectly glazed pork chop on her plate. "Go ahead and eat. You must be starving after the commute." Harper stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. She had no idea what to do, and neither did I. We both stood there, stiff as boards. Meanwhile, my wife pulled out a chair, picked up her fork, and looked at me. "Sit down and eat. The food is going to get cold." I dropped heavily into my chair. Harper sat next to me, her face pale. The meal proceeded in a crushing silence. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware against porcelain and the awkward gulping of food. Every so often, my wife would offer Harper more sides. "Please eat up. Do not be shy. My wife kept a grip on her fork, smiling as she passed the dishes, but her eyes still passed right through the two of us, staring into the void. I did not dare look her in the eye. I just stared down at my plate. One thought raced through my mind. Why? Why is she not screaming at me? Why is she not crying? Why is she not kicking Harper out of the house? The only answer I could come up with was that my wife was simply too submissive and pure. Deep down, I felt a wave of relief. I thought I had dodged a bullet. After dinner, my wife cleared the table, poured Harper a mug of hot chamomile tea, and turned to me. It is getting chilly tonight. I will bring out an extra blanket so she can sleep on the couch in the living room. You two can relax and talk. Harper looked horrified and shook her head violently. Oh no, no, I am going home. I will leave right now. But my wife had already walked into the guest room and brought out a comforter and a pillow, setting them on the couch. Then she walked into our master bedroom and shut the door behind her. The door clicked shut silently without a single loud noise. Harper stood in the middle of the living room, clutching her purse to her chest, shivering. She whispered to me, "Hey, why is your wife not reacting at all? Is she crazy? I am really scared." I could not answer her. I just stared blankly at the tightly shut bedroom door. An indescribable sense of dread began to spread through my mind like a poisonous fungus. It was a nameless, ominous feeling. The harder I tried to rationalize it, the more the entire situation felt like a bizarre nightmare. That night, Harper and I sat in the living room without exchanging a single word. Harper could not take her eyes off the bedroom door, as if a monster were going to burst out of it at any second. Before dawn broke, she told me she wanted me to drive her home. Before walking out the front door, Harper looked at me with bloodshot eyes and said, "I do not think I can ever come back to this house. Something is wrong. I am terrified." I dropped Harper off and returned to the house. The sun was just starting to rise, but my wife was already awake, wiping down the dining table and humming an unrecognizable tune. Breakfast was already set out. Bacon, eggs, and toast. One portion for me, one for Harper, 2 portions in total. "Did your guest leave?" she asked in an entirely nonchalant voice. "Yeah, she went home," I replied. "That is a shame. I was going to make her some hot oatmeal. I noticed she had a bit of a cough yesterday." My throat tightened and I could not speak. I did not understand why my throat felt blocked, and I did not have the courage to ask her anything. That evening my wife cooked an extra portion of dinner for my mistress. The following night, she made extra food again. 3 plates and 3 sets of silverware remained laid out on the dining table. Harper was sitting across from my wife, her face rigid, unable to make eye contact. I sat awkwardly between them, feeling like an actor shoved onto a stage in a twisted farce without a script. My wife slowly pushed a bowl of hot soup in front of Harper. "Have a little of this. It will warm you up before we eat the main course. The weather is so unpredictable lately. It is easy for women to catch a chill." Harper managed a faint, fading thank you, picking up her spoon and taking a sip. I saw her hand trembling slightly. My wife kept her deeply affectionate smile plastered on her face, staring right at Harper. Then my wife picked up her fork to serve the food. She transferred a succulent piece of braised pork belly into Harper's bowl. That was the exact moment it happened. I saw my wife slip something out from the long sleeve of her cardigan. It was a tiny amount of pale yellow powder. She sprinkled it over the meat so naturally, so swiftly, as if it were a long-ingrained habit. My entire body froze. My heart started pounding against my ribs. What the hell was that? Seasoning, medicine, or something worse? I did not even have the courage to imagine. Cold sweat trailed down my spine. I wanted to scream and flip Harper's plate over, but my body refused to move as if someone had pinned my arms and legs down. All I could do was sit there and watch. Oblivious, Harper picked up the meat, put it in her mouth, and chewed. My wife watched her, her eyes crinkling in a smile, then turned to me and spoke softly. "You should eat, too. It will not taste good if it gets cold." I picked up my fork with trembling hands, but I absolutely could not bring myself to eat or even look at my food. I just nodded and pretended to push the green beans around my plate. Thousands of questions swirled in my mind. What did my wife just put in Harper's food? Why did she do that? How long has this been going on? And why in 3 years had I never caught her doing this even once? Dinner dragged on. Harper emptied her plate and drank all her soup. My wife offered her more, rolling up her sleeve slightly and sprinkling the powder again. This time I saw it clearly. Hidden inside the sleeve of her cardigan was a tiny brown glass vial. She lightly dusted the powder over a piece of fish before placing it on Harper's plate. Try some of this too. The fish is incredibly fresh. My mother shipped it to us all the way from Pennsylvania. Harper finally seemed to relax a little and managed a weak smile. You are a really amazing cook. The house always smells so wonderful. My wife looked down at her own plate. Yes. Well, if you cook delicious meals at home, it is the best way to keep your husband tethered to you. As you can see, I am doing a spectacular job keeping my husband completely tied to me. Am I not? Her tone was as light and even as ever, but I felt a block of ice slide down my back. Harper stopped chewing. Her eyes went wide as a rabbit in headlights, darting between me and my wife. She had no idea how to respond. My wife looked up and broke into a massive grin. I am just joking. Please eat. The air above the dining table froze solid. Harper immediately dropped her head and started shoveling food into her mouth faster. It was painfully obvious she wanted this meal to end as quickly as humanly possible. But my wife chewed her food agonizingly slowly, taking tiny, deliberate bites, occasionally looking up to smile at Harper. In brief flashes, I realized that my wife's eyes were not smiling at all. The gaze piercing out of those two pitch-black pupils was the unblinking scrutiny of an apex predator. I swallowed hard. A horrifying thought crossed my mind. How many times had this happened? Had she done this to other women before or to me? I looked down at my own plate. How many meals had she cooked for me? How many times had she smiled that affectionate smile while serving food onto my plate? I could not even begin to count. Suddenly, my stomach twisted violently and a wave of nausea surged up the back of my throat. I shoved my chair back and shot up. I need to use the restroom. My wife kept smiling at me. Go ahead, Harper and I will finish up here. I practically sprinted to the bathroom, locked the door, and collapsed onto the cold tile floor. My heart was beating like a war drum. My face in the mirror was pale and drawn, my temples slick with cold sweat. I whispered to myself, "What did you just see? Was that real? Or am I losing my mind?" I splashed cold water on my face, desperately trying to calm down. Maybe it was just a seasoning, a special spice blend she uses for certain recipes. I am just overthinking this. She is so gentle and quiet. How could she possibly hurt anyone? But in my mind, the image of her hand sprinkling that powder over Harper's food looped continuously, vividly. By the time I came out of the bathroom, dinner was over. Harper was sitting on the living room sofa, clutching a glass of water, her face still radiating anxiety. My wife was humming as she cleared the table. I could hear the clinking of dishes as she started washing them in the sink. It was such an aggressively ordinary, peaceful domestic scene. Harper shot me a look, signaling she wanted to speak in private. I stepped out onto the back patio and she followed. The cold night wind whipped her hair around. She looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Hey, I feel really weird. The way your wife looks at me, it is just I cannot even explain it. When you went to the bathroom, she asked me how many more days I wanted to stay. She said if I stayed here with her, she would cook me all sorts of delicious food. I did not say a word. Harper gripped my hand tightly. I am scared. I cannot stay here another minute. Take me home. I nodded. I wanted to escape this house just as badly. I went inside and asked my wife if it was okay for me to drop Harper off. Wiping her hands on her damp apron, my wife was still smiling. Of course. Drive safely. Harper, come back and visit whenever you have time. I will make you something else delicious next time. Harper hurriedly bowed her head in thanks, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out the front door. Before stepping outside, I glanced back at my wife, standing under the yellow glow of the living room lights. She was waving goodbye, but against the deep shadows gathering behind her, all I could focus on was her long sleeve, the sleeve where I knew that brown glass vial was hidden. I drove Harper back to her apartment. For the entire drive, she sat in dead silence, her face pale. As she got out of the car, she asked me a question. Hey, let me ask you one thing. Has your wife ever made a separate meal just for you to eat by yourself? Was there ever a time she made something special just for you? I froze in the driver's seat. The nutritious chicken broth she specifically made for me whenever I felt sick. The thickest cuts of meat and fish that always ended up on my plate. The side dishes she set aside just for my lunches. The memories flooded my brain. My throat locked up and I could not answer. When I finally got home that night, my wife was already asleep. On the dining table, a warm late-night snack was left for me under a food cover. Next to it was a small sticky note in her handwriting. Eat this before bed. I made some beef bone broth for your hangover. Staring at the steaming bowl of broth in silence, only one question spiraled in my mind. What is inside this soup? Harper had scraped her plate clean, eating every last bite my wife had served her. Remembering that fact made my heart race out of control. I did not sleep a wink that night. I lay stiffly next to my wife, listening to her rhythmic breathing in the dark, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. The motion of her hand sprinkling that powder over the meat replayed in my head on an endless loop. It has to be seasoning. My mom used to mix natural herbal powders into her cooking, too. I tried to comfort myself. But why did she hide it? Why deliberately conceal it up her sleeve? Around dawn, I finally passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, it was 8 a.m. and my wife was not in bed. I walked out to the living room and found her wiping the dining table, humming that same tune. Breakfast for two was laid out. Did Harper go home? I asked. She texted me early this morning saying she had a family emergency to deal with, my wife said. I felt a surge of relief that she was gone, but an ominous feeling immediately followed. Why did she not call me? I checked my phone and found a text from Harper sent at 6 a.m. Hey, I am going home first. I feel incredibly sick. I could not sleep at all. I am so nauseous and I feel like I am going to throw up. Did we eat something weird last night? Get some rest. I reread the message over and over. Nauseous. Going to throw up. I stared at my wife's back as she quietly worked in the kitchen. Her slightly slouched posture. Her long hair tied back neatly. She looked so perfectly ordinary. At the office all day, my mind was entirely focused on my house. I texted Harper, "How are you feeling?" Her reply came back. "Still sick. My body feels like lead, and I am constantly nauseous. Hey, do you think your wife put something in my food last night or am I just being paranoid?" I could not reply. I had no idea what to say. I purposely came home late that evening. The thought of sitting across from my wife and eating terrified me. Even looking at a dinner plate gave me the creeps. Seeing me come in late, my wife asked the same question she always did. "Have you had dinner?" Then she pointed to the table. I left a cover over the food. Heat it up in the microwave if you get hungry. With that, she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat alone in the living room, holding my breath. The ticking of the wall clock echoed dryly through the house. I stared toward the kitchen. The darkness in there looked thicker and more viscous than usual. I stood up and silently crept toward the pantry. My heart rate climbed steadily. I opened the wooden cabinet doors. I started rummaging through the familiar containers of soy sauce, vegetable oil, chicken bouillon, black pepper, and garlic powder. And then I found it. Tucked away in the back corner, hidden behind a box of Earl Grey tea bags, was an unlabeled brown glass vial. Inside was a pale yellow powder that looked similar to turmeric, but slightly off. Tiny dried flakes resembling flower petals floated in the powder. I popped the cork and took a sniff. A sweet but pungent, nausea-inducing herbal scent hit my nose. Just smelling it made my vision blur and brought on a dizzy spell. My hands shook violently. I quickly scanned the quiet kitchen, pulled out my phone and took pictures of the vial from every angle. I photographed the inside of the cabinet and exactly where the vial had been hidden. Then I sealed it and put it back in the exact same spot. Sneaking out of the kitchen with the stealth of a burglar, I collapsed onto the living room couch. Feeling like my heart was going to explode, I let out a ragged breath. I opened my phone's gallery and zoomed in on the photos I had just taken. Looking closely, I noticed faint scratch marks on the surface of the glass, like letters that had been rubbed away. It looked like some kind of scientific or botanical name. My head spun. I desperately tried to hold on to my sanity. It is just a spice. She is a great cook. Of course, she uses unique ingredients. My mom used to throw all sorts of weird herbs into her stews. There is nothing to be afraid of. But why did she hide it? Why stash it behind the tea boxes where no one could see it? Why was there no label? And why in 3 years had I never once seen her use this powder during our normal dinners? Why did she only use it on Harper? I texted Harper. "Where are you? Are you feeling any better?" She replied instantly. "I am home. Still sick. I have been throwing up all day and cannot keep anything down. I am thinking about going to the pharmacy to get some medicine." "Okay, get some medicine. Text me after you take it." I locked my phone and buried my face in my hands. The internal conflict was tearing me to shreds. On one hand, I had my gentle, submissive wife, who had not complained once in 3 years. On the other hand, I had a bizarre situation and a mounting pile of circumstantial evidence. I wanted to believe her. I had to believe her. She was my only family. But one question dominated my thoughts. If she is innocent, why is everything so incredibly creepy? And if she is guilty, I could not even begin to imagine what would happen next. That night, I sat in the dark living room until 2 a.m., staring blankly at the closed bedroom door. Every so often, I would open my phone, stare at the photos of the vial, and lock it again. The pungent smell of that mysterious powder seemed permanently burned into the back of my nasal cavity. Around 3 a.m., I dozed off on the couch. I had a nightmare. My wife was cooking. She turned to look at me slowly, smiling gently and warmly. The smile was the same, but under the yellow kitchen light. Her face was grotesquely distorted, and her pitch-black eyes stared unblinkingly at me. When she raised her hand, she was clutching the brown glass vial, and white smoke was pouring out of it. I woke up with a strangled scream. The sun was already up and my back was drenched in cold sweat. I looked toward the kitchen, and my wife was cooking, her slightly slouched back, her hair tied up neatly. 3 portions of breakfast were already set on the table. Did she actually prepare a portion for Harper this morning? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Harper. Hey, I am still incredibly sick. My whole body is shaking. Can you please take me to the hospital? Reading the text, I looked back at the kitchen. My wife turned to me and flashed a massive smile. It was a warm, peaceful smile, but her eyes were dead. Those dark pupils passed right through me, looking at something far, far away. I swallowed hard and asked myself, how long has she been keeping this vial here? And how many times has she used it? That morning, I lied to my wife, saying I had to go into the office early and left the house. In reality, I was waiting for Harper at a coffee shop near her apartment. We needed to talk. Harper walked out of her building looking like a ghost, her lips pale and trembling. She clutched her stomach, collapsed onto a bench, and whispered in a fading voice, "Hey, I am not getting any better. I keep throwing up, and I feel delirious. I just want them to run a blood test." Looking at her, I muttered to myself, if they run a blood test, they will find out exactly what is in her system. And if they find something, I drove Harper to a private clinic. The doctor drew her blood and said the results would be ready by the afternoon. While we waited, I sat in my car and scrolled through my phone. I stared at the photo of the vial again. Then I opened Facebook and searched for my wife's name. Her profile was set to private. There were just a few public photos of houseplants and shared recipes. Nothing out of the ordinary. I racked my brain. What did I actually know about my wife over the last 3 years? Her name was Clara. She was from a rural town in Pennsylvania where her elderly mother lived alone. Before we got married, she said she worked an administrative job at a small logistics company. When we got married and I told her to be a stay-at-home wife, she obediently agreed. I had no idea where she went to college, who her friends were, what she liked, or what she feared because in 3 years, I had never bothered to ask. That afternoon, I went with Harper to hear the test results. The doctor looked at me with a grave expression. We detected unusual compounds in the patient's blood that our standard panels cannot fully identify. We suspect drug or toxin poisoning. Did she consume anything unusual recently? Harper's body began to shake violently and she gripped my arm tight. I swallowed hard and stood there in silence. The doctor said further testing was required and advised us to contact the police if we suspected someone had intentionally poisoned her. After dropping Harper back at her apartment, I drove like a maniac back to my house. I had to find out. I had to know exactly who my wife was. I stormed into the master bedroom and threw open her closet. Her plain, unassuming clothes were neatly folded. I dug through the bottom drawers, just underwear and socks. But when I felt around the very back of the lowest drawer, my fingers brushed against a small wooden box. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a college diploma. I checked the name. University of Illinois at Chicago College of Pharmacy. Degree in pharmacognosy and botanical medicine. Graduated with honors. I froze on the spot. My hands shaking like leaves in the wind. My wife had a degree in pharmacognosy, the study of medicinal drugs derived from plants. She had never mentioned this to me. Not once in 3 years had she ever brought up anything related to it. I covered my face with both hands, desperately trying to remember the past. Suddenly, a flood of fragmented memories hit me like a broken dam. My wife brewing special herbal teas for me, cooking with bizarre exotic ingredients I had never seen before. handing me herbal remedies she claimed to have mixed herself whenever I was sick. I just assumed they were her unique cooking secrets or traditional home remedies. This cannot be happening. I kept digging through the box and pulled out an old yellowed photograph. It was a picture of a younger Clara standing next to a middle-aged man in a lab coat. The background looked like an old rundown supplement manufacturing facility. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back was, "Dad and me at the extraction lab, 2015. Her father. My wife had never spoken about her father. She only ever said her mother lived alone in the country. I thought back to our wedding day. Her mother had come alone, telling me her father had passed away early. I believed her and never pushed the subject. Digging deeper into the box, I pulled out an old notebook with a peeling leather cover. I opened it. The pages were densely packed with formulas, extraction ratios, and botanical names written in cramped handwriting. Next to standard herbal remedies were detailed notes on the specific effects and severe side effects of various toxic plants. Flipping through the pages frantically, my eyes locked onto one specific entry. Extract of Adam, monkshood, and valeriana. Dosage and sedative properties. Extreme caution required. Use only in microdoses. Overdose causes vomiting, severe vertigo, and respiratory distress. I turned pale and started trembling violently. At the very bottom of the page, scribbled in frantic handwriting, was a note. Tested on mice. 0.2 milligrams per kilogram dosage. Total loss of motor function. Duration of effect unverified. Testing ongoing. I threw the notebook onto the floor as if I had touched a red-hot coal. My heart felt like it was going to burst. The familiar sights of my bedroom, the closet, the vanity, the pillows I slept on every night, they all suddenly felt incredibly alien and grotesque. It felt like all these objects were staring at me, asking me a question. Who the hell have you been living with for the past 3 years? I stumbled out of the bedroom and went to the kitchen. I opened the pantry and pulled out the brown glass vial. Examining the powder under the bright daylight, I noticed microscopic black specks mixed in with the yellow. I brought it to my nose and sniffed again. This time, the distinct overpowering smell of processed alkaloids made me physically gag. I took another photo, put it exactly back where I found it, and collapsed heavily into a chair. The scattered puzzle pieces in my mind were finally snapping together. The silently sacrificing, submissive wife, the rigidly punctual mealtimes, the smile eternally plastered on her face, the eerie silence. All of it was meticulously calculated. She was no victim. She was. I was too terrified to think any further. I remembered a day a year ago when I had caught a brutal fever and was hovering between consciousness and delirium. My wife stayed by my side, nursing me with absolute devotion. She fed me soup and gave me medicine, and she said she brewed herself. I remembered swallowing a small brownish pill. She told me it was a natural restorative supplement. I took it and my fever miraculously broke. But thinking about it now, the blood in my veins turns to ice. Was that actually medicine or was it something else? My phone buzzed. It was Harper. Hey, I am terrified. I just threw up blood. Can you please take me to the ER? The hand holding my phone locked up and my eyes darted to the kitchen. My wife was standing there. I had not even heard her walk in. Her slightly slouched back, her hair tied up. She was rinsing rice to make dinner. That slow, lethargic, incredibly familiar movement now filled me with pure dread. I stood up and grabbed my car keys. My wife turned her head. Where are you going? Dinner is almost ready. I tried to sound as normal as possible. Oh, something urgent came up at work. I will be right back. She smiled and nodded. Okay. Hurry back. I am making pot roast tonight, your favorite. I bolted out the door, jumped in my car, and slammed on the gas like a madman. In the rearview mirror, I saw my wife standing in the doorway, watching me leave. She was still smiling affectionately, but I knew the truth now. Behind that smile lurked an entirely different entity, a monster I had been completely blind to for 3 years. Driving to Harper's place, I tried to organize my thoughts. What should I do? Call the police? Confront my wife or just stay silent and live as if nothing happened? I felt like I was going insane. But one thing was certain. I had lived for 3 years without even knowing the true identity of the woman I called my wife. I took Harper to the ER. The doctors hooked her up to an IV and monitored her condition. They suspected food poisoning, but her reactions were atypical, so they said it could be chemical toxicity. I stood in the hospital corridor looking through the glass at Harper lying pale on the bed. In my pocket was the brown glass vial I had secretly snatched from the house before I left. I had no idea what to do. I did not have the courage to go home, but I could not stay at the hospital either. I sat in my car in the parking garage under the glow of a street lamp. I pulled the vial out and stared at it. The pale yellow powder glinted menacingly, the notebook with the exact dosages and side effects, her degree in pharmacognosy and her smile. They all flashed through my mind in rapid succession. Goosebumps erupted all over my body. I called Marcus, an old college buddy who now worked at a chemical research lab in the city. I have a sample that I desperately need analyzed. It is a matter of life and death, I pleaded. Hearing the sheer panic in my voice, Marcus told me to meet him at his lab first thing in the morning. That night, I did not go home. I slept in my car in the hospital parking garage. I texted my wife telling her I had been sent on an emergency business trip and would be back in a few days. Her reply came instantly. Okay, drive safe. When you get back, I will make some new side dishes for you. New side dishes? Reading those words made my blood run backwards. I arrived at the lab early the next morning. Marcus handed me a visitor badge and led me into his workspace. I pulled the vial from my pocket and set it on the stainless steel table. Marcus picked it up, shook it gently, popped the cork, and took a sniff. He immediately furrowed his brow. Is this a spice? Why do you need a chemical analysis on this? I could not speak. Seeing my pale drawn face, Marcus did not press further. Give me 2 hours. I sat in a chair in the hallway and waited. Those 2 hours felt like an eternity. People in lab coats walking by. The humming of centrifuges. The sterile smell of chemicals. My heart pounded erratically. I prayed fervently that I was wrong, that this was just normal seasoning, that my wife was just the quiet, unassuming woman I thought she was. Finally, the door opened and Marcus stepped out, his expression grim. He pulled me into an empty office and locked the door. He lowered his voice. Where the hell did you get this? I swallowed hard. Why is there a problem? Marcus pulled off his latex gloves and looked me dead in the eye. This is not a spice and it is not a health supplement. This sample contains aconitine derived from monk's hood mixed with other potent toxic alkaloids. It is also cut with heavy sedatives and painkillers. In layman's terms, this is a chemical restraint. It dulls the nervous system, slows reflexes, induces extreme lethargy, and causes severe nausea. If taken in large doses or over a long period, it will completely destroy the liver and kidneys. I froze, cold sweat soaking my shirt. Marcus looked at me suspiciously. What kind of mess are you mixed up in? Who did you get this from? Does this have something to do with your family? I did not answer. I just stared at the vial on the desk. The pale yellow powder, which I thought was harmless, now looked like a lethal weapon. Marcus continued. And there is one more thing. Aside from what I just mentioned, this sample contains a very rare undocumented synthetic compound. It acts as a central nervous system depressant that induces mild dependency. Basically, anyone who takes this regularly will slowly become docile, compliant, and easy to control. Do you understand what I am saying? I nodded, but my mind was completely blank. Docile and easy to control. Who had my wife been feeding this to? Harper? Me or someone else, and why? Marcus grabbed my shoulder. Man, this is no joke. Lives are on the line, and this is a major felony. If you have solid proof, go to the cops right now. Do not try to handle this on your own. Listen to me. I nodded like a ghost leaving its body. I took the vial and walked out of the lab. The sky was overcast, heavy with dark clouds. Standing in the middle of the city, looking up at the sky, I felt like I was free falling into a bottomless abyss. I drove to Harper's apartment. She had been discharged and was lying weakly in bed. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. Hey, I am so scared. The doctor said they found traces of weird synthetic drugs in my blood. They asked if I had taken any street drugs, but I told them I had not. They asked if I ate anything unusual recently, and the only thing I could think of was the dinner at your house. I hugged her, but my chest felt as cold as ice. I had no idea what to say. Should I tell her the truth? I got Harper back to sleep and went out to buy her some food. Walking down the street, I called my mother-in-law. I had never once called her before. I had to look up her number from my wife's phone records. A raspy elderly voice answered. Hello, Mom. It is Julian. I am just calling to see how you are doing. The old woman went silent for a moment, then answered in a sharp, drastically different tone. What happened? I asked carefully. How long has it been since Clara's father passed away? The mother-in-law was silent again, then sighed heavily. Who told you that man was dead? My heart stopped. Wait, he is alive? She scoffed. We cut ties with him a long time ago. He is a disgrace to the family. I do not even want to speak his name. Why are you asking? I tried to keep my voice steady. Oh, no reason. I was just wondering. Take care. When I hung up, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. My wife had lied. Her father was not dead. He was estranged. Why? I looked at the skyline in the distance in the direction of my house. In that house, a woman was waiting for me, preparing another meal, calculating the exact dosage to turn me into a docile, easily managed piece of livestock. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. When I was searching the kitchen cabinets, there was one small drawer secured with a heavy brass padlock. I sped all the way back to my house. When I opened the front door, my wife was not there. There was a note on the table. The neighbor is feeling sick, so I went over to help her out for a bit, heat up the food, and eat. Ignoring the note, I sprinted into the kitchen, grabbed a crowbar from the garage, and forcefully pried open the locked drawer. Inside was another notebook and a small wooden box. I opened the notebook and read it. It was my wife's journal. Flipping rapidly through the neat handwriting, my eyes locked onto an entry in the second half of the book. Today that man brought that woman into the house. Perfect. The plan begins today. Day by day, little by little, until he cannot survive without me. Both of them will learn exactly what it feels like to live in absolute silence. They will feel it in their bones. Reading this, my vision went dark. My hands were shaking so badly I almost tore the page. I turned to the next page. The method my father taught me for controlling people. Not through violence or authority, but through patience and weaponized kindness. You control them with the warm meals you cook for them every single day. They will never suspect a thing, so they will willingly become your puppets. By the time they realize it, it will be far too late to turn back. I opened the wooden box. Inside, it was packed tightly with dozens of small glass vials, each labeled by hand. Mild sedatives, sleep inducers, CNS depressants, binding agents, highly concentrated monk's hood powder. I collapsed onto the cold kitchen tile. This house, the woman I called my wife, it was all a 3-year-long blood-curdling theatrical performance. And I, who thought I was the one in control, looking down on her, was actually just a fat, stupid prey animal caught in her web. My phone rang. It was a text from Harper. Hey, I feel like I am going to throw up again. But I just remembered something. When you went to the bathroom, your wife poured me a cup of herbal tea. She said it would help me sleep. I drank it, but wait, do you think I did not read any further? The glass vials in the wooden box gleamed menacingly under the yellow kitchen lights. A lethal beautiful shine. The electronic lock on the front door beeped. My wife was home. The sound of her slippers on the living room hardwood. Her voice calling out. Are you home? Did you eat? Should I heat up the pot roast? I looked at the splintered drawer and the scattered vials on the floor. Her footsteps were getting closer to the kitchen. There was no time to hide anything. My wife stopped at the entrance of the kitchen. She looked at me, looked at the smashed drawer, and looked at the vials scattered across the floor. She was still smiling, but it was not her usual affectionate smile. It was a cold, bone-chilling smirk. You are home early. I do not remember how I got out of that kitchen. I just ran. I bolted out of the house, jumped into my car, and slammed the gas pedal like a madman. I did not even have the courage to look back. I knew I could not face that look in her eyes again. That smile and that gaze felt like a dagger plunged directly into my heart. I will never forget it as long as I live. I pulled over at a random coffee shop, collapsed into a chair, and shook violently. I ordered a black coffee and chugged it, but my hands would not stop trembling and my head was spinning. What the hell did I just experience? What did I just see? I pulled out my phone and quickly reviewed the photos I had taken. The brown vial, the box of chemicals, the journal entries and her neat handwriting. I read it again. That man brought that woman home. Perfect. The plan begins today. That man was me and that woman was Harper. And the plan? What plan? A plan to turn us into mindless puppets who could never leave her side. 3 years of dinners, the meals she cooked for me, the medicine and food she hand-fed me when I was sick, it all rushed back to me. I thought it was love, but it was a massive, prolonged biological experiment. Sitting in the middle of a crowded coffee shop, I broke down and started sobbing loudly like a child. People stared at me, but I did not care. I cried because I despised my own stupidity. I cried for 3 years of pointless delusions. I cried because I felt sorry for Harper, who had been poisoned without knowing a thing. And I cried out of sheer self-pity, crushed by a suffocating, paralyzing terror. I called Marcus. He answered immediately. What happened? What is going on? I spoke in a ragged voice. I found dozens of those vials in my house, and I found a journal. My wife is executing a plan. Marcus was silent for a moment before replying. Listen to me. Go to the police station right now. Do not hesitate. Your life is in danger. I shot back. Go to the police and say what? That my wife is putting drugs in my food and my mistress's food. And when the cops ask why she did it, what the hell am I supposed to say? I am a garbage husband who blatantly cheated on her and brought my mistress into our own house. In the eyes of the police, I am the perpetrator. Marcus sighed. You are right. But think about your health and that woman's health. This drug is no joke. It rots your body and your mind. If you do not stop this now, there is no telling what will happen to the two of you. I fell silent. He was right, but I was terrified. I was afraid of the police, afraid of confronting my wife, and most of all, afraid of facing the rock-bottom ugliness of my own actions. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. People were bustling by. Everyone was living their own lives. I wondered if anyone out there was going through the same agony as me. Was there anyone else living completely oblivious to the monster they were married to? Why did she do this? For revenge? To keep me tethered to her? Or was this her own twisted way of protecting our marriage? I had no idea. For the next few days, I lived in a half-insane state. I went home, ate dinner with my wife, and slept next to her. But every meal was absolute torture. Every side dish, every spoonful of soup, every sip of water was highly suspicious. I barely ate, pretending I was full or just too tired. My wife continued to act gently, asking about my day and serving food onto my plate. Eat up. I made all your favorites. Looking at the glazed pork chops, I pictured her hand sprinkling that powder over Harper's bowl. I swallowed hard and pushed my plate away. I am stuffed, you finish it. She smiled and replied. Okay. Let me know if you get hungry later. I started tailing my wife. Whenever she went to the grocery store, I followed her from a distance. The butcher, the produce aisle, the bakery. It was a completely mundane routine. But one time, I saw her slip into an old rundown herbal apothecary in a sketchy alleyway. 20 minutes later, she walked out carrying a black plastic bag. I did not have the courage to approach her. That night, I dug through her purse and found paper packets of raw herbs, dried roots emitting a pungent, harsh odor, plants I could not even name. I took photos and sent them to Marcus. His reply sent shivers down my spine. Wolfsbane, belladonna, dura, all highly toxic botanicals. Seriously, man, watch your back. Sitting on the toilet looking at those photos, I shook uncontrollably. I knew I had to do something, but I still hesitated. Every time I reached for the door handle to leave and go to the police, the image of my wife flashed before my eyes, mopping the floor, cooking rice, doing the laundry. She looked so breathtakingly ordinary that I could not fathom her being a dangerous psychopath. Am I the crazy one? Am I reading too many thriller novels? Is this all just a massive coincidence? But every time I looked into her eyes, I knew I was right. Usually her gaze was soft and warm, but occasionally, when I caught her staring at me and our eyes met, her look was incredibly cold and distant, like a scientist observing a lab rat. My whole body shuddered. I stayed in contact with Harper every day. She was still bedridden, suffering from extreme nausea. I told her to go back to the hospital, but she said she was terrified of the medical bills. I transferred money to her account and begged her to go immediately. Her reply came back. Hey, I am scared. I feel like I have contracted some horrible disease. I could not say anything to comfort her because I could not tell her the truth. One night, lying next to my wife, listening to her soft breathing, I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I whispered in my mind, "Who are you? What have you done to me?" There was no answer, only the ticking of the clock on the wall. When I woke up the next morning, my wife was already up preparing breakfast. Sitting across from me as I ate, she asked her usual question. Is it good? I nodded, burying my face in my coffee mug. I could not bring myself to look at her. I cannot live like this anymore. I need to ask her directly and end this. But I was terrified. Terrified of her answer. terrified of what would happen next. Above all, I was terrified of admitting that I was just a pathetic husband who thought he was the master of the house, when in reality, I was nothing more than a pawn in a game run by the woman I had spent years ignoring. I looked at her, her slightly slouched back as she washed dishes in the sink. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting a warm golden glow over her tied-up hair. Beautiful, submissive, and domestic. The woman I had never truly loved or cherished. And now the most dangerous person in my life. She turned around and flashed a bright smile. "Do you have the day off today or are you going in?" I stammered. I have to go to work." She nodded. "Okay. I will have some new side dishes ready for dinner, so come home early." I nodded, grabbed my keys, and practically fled the house. Before walking out, I glanced back at her in the kitchen. She was still smiling, but hiding within that gaze was something deeply alien, something I did not dare put a name to. Driving with a heavy heart, I knew I had to make a decision. Confront her or run. I cannot run forever. But if I confront her, I have to face a horrific truth. And I was terrified I would not be able to handle it. The face staring back at me in the rearview mirror belonged to a stranger, a cowardly, pathetic sinner, a man who had suddenly fallen into a miserable state. If I had just cherished and loved her, would things be different? Would she have never turned into this monster? Or was I the one who forced her into this corner? She still cooks on time, asks about my day, and smiles. But now, every single one of those actions drives me insane. I had no idea if I could pull myself out of this swamp or if it was already far too late. That night, I did not go home. I went to Harper's apartment. She was curled up in a corner, dry heaving. Seeing her like that broke my heart. I had to make a choice. Tomorrow morning, I will go home and face my wife head on. I will ask her everything. And I swore I would not run away anymore. But when I opened my front door the next morning, my wife was already sitting on the living room sofa waiting for me. On the coffee table in front of her was a thick manila folder. She looked at me and smiled. It was a completely different smile. Cold, dry, and calculating. "You are finally home. Have a seat. We need to talk." I froze in my tracks, unable to take a single step. She smiled again. "What is wrong? Are you scared? Did you think you were the only one living in fear?" Swallowing hard, I walked over and sat across from her. She pushed the thick folder toward me. "Open it." With trembling hands, I flipped to the first page. A stack of photos spilled out. Photos of Harper and me on the sidewalk in front of a motel inside my car. Photos of us kissing, holding hands. I turned to the next page. Chat logs. My entire WhatsApp history with Harper, perfectly screenshotted, down to the exact date and time. Next was a USB flash drive. She plugged it into a tablet and hit play. Harper and my voices echoed from the speaker. "I miss you. I miss you too." My face completely drained of color. I turned the audio off and stared at her. She rested her chin on her hand, looking at me with absolute composure. "Did you hire a private investigator to follow me?" She laughed and shook her head. "Not an investigator. I was just protecting my assets. You are my husband, which makes you my asset. I have the right to know what you are doing, do I not?" I was speechless. She slid another stack of papers toward me. "Keep looking." Bank statements. Every single dollar I had transferred to Harper was documented. Credit card statements, the hotels we stayed at, the high-end restaurants, the designer clothes and bags I bought her. My wife had everything, absolutely everything. Cold sweat poured down my back. She smiled and said, "Do not worry. I have not done anything with this yet. I just collected it. You never know when it might come in handy." She spoke in a soft, even voice as if she were discussing the weather. She stood up, grabbed her phone from a shelf, and showed me a video. It was footage of Harper and me eating dinner in our kitchen that night, filmed from a perfectly hidden angle. It captured Harper's terrified face and my cowardly lowered head. It showed us whispering in the living room and Harper looking back in terror as she left. I looked up at her. "You put cameras in the house?" She nodded as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Yes, since 2 years ago when you started coming home late. When you started hiding in the bathroom to text and looking at me like I was a nuisance 2 years ago. For 2 years, she had known everything. Every single action and word I thought I had perfectly concealed was recorded without fail." She looked at me with laughing eyes. "You thought you were so smart, didn't you? You thought I was just an idiot who only knew how to clean and cook. You were wrong." She crossed her legs and stared straight at me. Do you know what my major was in college? Pharmacognosy. I know exactly how to extract compounds, how to mix them, and how to make people delirious and lose their minds. I know how to gather intel, how to lay traps, and how to execute a plan. My father taught me everything right before he went to federal prison. I flinched violently, my body shaking. Prison? She nodded. Yes, he manufactured illegal designer drugs and lethal supplements. He got 20 years. But before he went in, he taught me a very important lesson. There is no one in this world you can trust. Trust only yourself. And if you want to protect what is yours, you have to be far more vicious and cunning than they are. She slowly leaned closer to me. I shrank back in pure terror. She laughed. What are you so afraid of? Did you think I was going to murder you? I was just protecting my household. Did you really think I didn't know you were cheating? I knew from day one, but I did not throw a tantrum. I waited for you to walk right into my trap, and my predictions were flawless. She pointed at the stack of documents. There is enough evidence in here to leave you penniless and throw you out on the street with nothing but the clothes on your back. Adultery, dissipation of marital assets, irreconcilable differences. I have a ruthless divorce attorney ready to go. I have witnesses, camera footage, text messages, and photos. What do you have? You have a young mistress who throws up every night because of the powder I slipped into her food. My eyes went wide. You admit it? She burst out laughing. Admit what? Who saw me? Where's the proof? The vials in the kitchen. Do you think the cops are going to kick down the door with a search warrant? If they do, I will just say it is a natural herbal supplement I made for myself. I will tell them my husband took it every day for 3 years. Can you prove otherwise? You ate it for 3 years and you did not die. You are perfectly healthy. Cheating on me every single day. Running around town. It is a premium health supplement. I slumped into the sofa, gripping the armrests tightly. She continued. And as for that girl, I only gave her a microdose, just enough to make her exhausted, nauseous, and terrified. She will panic and go to the hospital. The doctors will tell her there are weird chemicals in her blood. She might even go to the police. But what is she going to tell them? That she got sick after the legal wife cooked her a meal. If she does, I will just say I felt sorry for her, brought her into my home, and served her a hot dinner. Is that a crime? As for the drugs in her system, how am I supposed to know if she took something at a club? I screamed, my voice shaking. You are insane. Her eyes flashed with murderous intent. I am insane. You cheated on me for 3 years, brought her into my house, and treated me like I was invisible. And you think I am the insane one? If you thought you were going to live like a king in my silence forever, you are the true lunatic. I waited for the perfect timing and now that time has come. She pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder and slammed it onto the table. It was a marital settlement agreement. I had my lawyer draft everything. My terms are an 80% split of all joint assets plus the monthly spousal support you will pay me. Sign this and all of this evidence gets buried forever. Pack your bags, take that woman, and live however you want. I won't stop you. Staring at the document, my vision widened out, she added. And if you refuse, this entire folder goes to the judge, your corporate HR department, and everyone you know. You will lose your job, your reputation, and your money. And do you think that young girl is going to stick around when she finds out her boyfriend is a penniless loser who spent 3 years getting filmed and completely outplayed by his wife? I looked up at her. Her face was as calm and gentle as ever, but her eyes were like pale blue ice. For the first time, it hit me in my bones that I never knew this woman at all. For 3 long years, I had never once looked deeply into her eyes. And looking into them now, all I saw was an endless, bottomless abyss. She leaned in close to my face and whispered, "You still thought we were playing chess, didn't you? Don't flatter yourself. I declared checkmate 2 years ago. I declared checkmate 2 years ago. You were just a stupid pawn I left on the board until I was ready to deliver the final strike." She straightened her posture, swept her hair back and smiled. That smile froze the blood in my veins. She turned toward the kitchen and said in her typical even tone, "Think it over. I am making lunch. Will you eat before you go? I am making a brand new recipe I have never cooked for you before." I stared at her back as she disappeared into the kitchen. Left alone on the table were the folder, the photos, the chat logs, the bank statements, and the divorce agreement demanding I surrender everything under the law. I do not know how long I sat there. I only remember that when I finally stood up, my legs were shaking so badly I almost collapsed. From the kitchen came the rhythmic sound of a chopping knife and the delicious smell of a simmering stew. A new day, a new meal. I, who had arrogantly believed I held all the cards, was now nothing more than a broken toy in the hands of a woman I never properly knew. I do not even remember when I signed the divorce papers. I only remember my hands shaking so violently that the ink from the pen bled outside the signature line. My wife picked up the document, checked it, nodded, and slipped it back into the folder. She smiled. Good. A wise choice. I thought you would agonize over it a bit longer. I did not say a word. I just stared blankly at this terrifying stranger. I left the house and drove straight to Harper's apartment. I had to tell her the truth and warn her to run. But when I pulled up to her building, Harper was already sitting on the curb, looking completely drained of life, her face ashen. The moment she saw me, she ran over, grabbed my arm, and shook violently. Your wife came here? My heart dropped. She came here. What did she say? Harper burst into tears. She showed me the photos, the pictures of you and me, the WhatsApp logs, and my blood test results, the poison in my blood. She admitted she put it in my food herself, but she just laughed and said it was no big deal. She said it was just a mild sedative and it would flush out of my system in a few days. I stood there paralyzed. Harper sobbed hysterically as she continued. She told me not to be scared. She said she never intended to permanently hurt me. She just wanted to show me exactly what happens when you intrude on someone else's marriage. Then she handed me an envelope. She told me to take it, go back to my hometown, and never step foot in Chicago again. I opened it, and there was $50,000 inside. Harper shoved the thick envelope into my hands. It was packed with stacks of crisp $100 bills. The moment I saw the money, the blood drained from my face. She said if I didn't leave, she would send all those photos and texts to my mom, my dad, my friends, and my boss. She said she would make sure I could never show my face in this country again. I am so scared. What do I do? I hugged her, but my heart was already frozen solid. I knew Harper had no other choice, and neither did I. My wife had calculated every single variable. The chess pieces, the lives of everyone involved, were held firmly in the palm of her hand. That afternoon, I drove Harper to the airport so she could fly back to her hometown. During the entire drive, she did not say a word, only quietly sobbing. When I dropped her off at the terminal, she looked at me one last time. I am sorry. I had no idea. I never imagined it would turn into something this horrific. I shook my head. It is not your fault. It is my fault. It is all my fault. Driving back into the city with a hollow chest, I received a text from my wife. Are you coming home for dinner? I made pot roast for you. Reading that text, a dry laugh escaped my lips. She had not changed at all. She cooked on time, asked about my day, and treated me kindly. But I knew that after this horrific storm had ripped through my life, nothing would ever be the same again. When I arrived, the dining table was already set. The steaming pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans, and gravy. My wife looked at me and smiled. Sit down and eat. I made extra sides today. Let's finish it all so I don't have to pack leftovers. I sat down and picked up my fork, but I absolutely could not bring myself to eat. I looked at her and asked, "Can you answer just one thing?" She placed a piece of meat on my plate and replied, "What is it? That powder in the cabinet? Was it really poison?" She threw her head back and laughed, shaking her head. "No, it was just turmeric mixed with some valerian root and chamomile extract for stress relief. It helps you sleep and settles your stomach. I used to take it for years when I had insomnia." I sat there in stunned silence. "But why did you sprinkle it on Harper's food? You told her it was poison." She looked at me, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Because if I called it poison, you would believe it. That was the only way she would get terrified and run away. And it was the only way you would get suspicious. Order a lab test, dig through the cabinets, pry open the locked drawer, and read my journal. I wanted you to find all of it. I wanted you to be terrified. Because only when you are truly terrified do you act exactly how I want you to." My jaw dropped. "Then what about all those vials in the wooden box? Were they all fake?" She nodded. "They are real botanical extracts. They belong to my father, but they are not lethal poisons, just mild sedatives and sleep aids. I kept them as a memento of him and I never intended to use them on anyone. They were just props. I kept them around just in case I ever needed to set a stage. She looked at me with a soft, patronizing gaze. See, I didn't actually do anything wrong. All I did was leave my things in their proper places. You were the one who snooped around, found them, wrote a whole thriller novel in your head, and shook with terror all by yourself. And once you were sufficiently terrified, I just had to swoop in and offer the divorce papers as your only way out. You had no choice but to drop to your knees and sign. It is a very simple mechanism. I was speechless, sitting there like an idiot. She continued eating peacefully, chewing her food slowly and deliberately. Then she looked up at me. Do you know what hurt me the most? It wasn't that you cheated. It wasn't even that you brought your mistress into our home. It was that for 3 years you never once looked at me like a human being. I lived right next to you and you treated me like I was invisible. To you I was just wallpaper, a machine designed to cook, clean and do laundry. I didn't exist in your eyes. Her normally steady voice trembled slightly and her eyes began to rean. I waited. I waited for you to look at me just once, for you to ask how was your day. Just once to eat the food I made. And tell me it was delicious to hold me warmly before we went to sleep. But in 3 years, you never did. Not even once. She quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. But it is okay. My father taught me something else. If people treat you like you are invisible, you have to force them to acknowledge your existence no matter what it takes. And I did it. You are looking right at me now, aren't you? Now you finally see exactly who I am. I looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, I truly saw my wife's face. Her long hair, her neat features, a woman forcing a smile through tear-stained eyes. The woman I had never loved, never cherished, but who had always stayed in this house, cooking for me, waiting for me. And the woman who had just burned her existence into my brain using the most horrifying method imaginable. I asked in a small voice, When did you start planning this? She thought for a moment before answering. 2 years ago, when you first met Harper, I knew immediately. I knew that eventually you would become arrogant enough to bring her into this house. I just didn't know when. So, I spent 2 years preparing for today. She picked up her fork, speaking as if nothing had happened. Eat. The roast is getting cold. I picked up my fork, but I couldn't swallow. A million questions exploded in my mind. If she knew everything for 2 years, what were all those meals she cooked on time? When she asked, Have you had dinner? When she smiled at me, was that love? Or was it a trap being set for a prey? I stared at her. She continued eating calmly. Outside the window, dusk was falling and a deep darkness crept into the small living room, swallowing the two of us as we sat across from each other. The man who had lost everything and the woman who had taken it all back. She looked at me and smiled. Eat. You will pass out if you don't. I picked up my spoon and took a bite of the pot roast. My favorite dish. The rich, savory gravy coated my throat. And a warm feeling spread through my chest. Her cooking was as perfect as ever, exactly the way I liked it, and my wife was still sitting right in front of me. But everything was different now. Forever. I looked back over the last 3 years, eating the food she cooked, sleeping in the bed next to her. I had seen absolutely nothing. Now that the truth was laid bare, the thousands of clues that had been right in front of my face since day one finally started to make sense. I remembered our wedding day, my wife, smiling shilly in her white dress. As relatives congratulated us, she looked at me with sparkling eyes. I thought it was happiness, but now I ask myself, was that the gaze of an architect admiring the foundation of her perfect revenge? In the early days of our marriage, whenever I came home late, she would be sitting on the couch, staring at the bracket front door. When I asked why she wasn't sleeping, she laughed and said, I just can't fall asleep until I know you are home safe. I thought it was the sweetness of a honeymoon phase. Now I ask myself, was that just a surveillance tactic to log my hours and track my movements? A year later, I started distancing myself from her. I texted constantly at home, came back late, and ignored our anniversary. Still, she cooked, cleaned, and smiled. Once, while I was in the shower, I caught her staring intently at my phone screen. I thought to myself, oh, she's jealous. How cute. Now I ask myself, was she copying my contacts, screenshotting my WhatsApp chats, and syncing my calendar? 2 years ago when I met the younger, vibrant Harper, I felt alive again. While Harper and I were out at fancy restaurants and taking trips, my wife was always at home waiting with a hot meal. When I came home late, she only asked if I had eaten, and I would brush her off and go to sleep. I thought she knew her place and was just being submissive. Now I ask myself, was that short question a cue to verify my alibi and turn on the voice recorder? When I went on that 3-day trip to Maui, I lied and said it was a corporate retreat. My wife carefully folded my shirts and packed my suitcase, smiling. Work hard and stay safe. I was relieved she didn't suspect a thing. Now I ask myself, was there a micro GPS tracker or recording device sewn into the lining of that suitcase? After that, I noticed subtle changes. She went to the market more often and cooked elaborate new dishes. When I asked what it was, she said she found a new fusion recipe online. It tasted amazing. Now I ask myself, was that new recipe meant to stimulate my appetite or was it part of a trial run to test the sedative dosages? Once I saw her staring intensely at her laptop screen, typing furiously. When I walked over, she minimized the window and laughed, saying she was organizing her recipes. I didn't ask further. Now I ask myself, was she actually logging recipe ingredients? Or was she backing up hidden camera footage and updating her observation logs on me? The day I came home after a date with Harper, my wife was sitting in the dark living room. When I asked why the lights were off, she said she was trying to save electricity. I thought she was just being cheap. Now I ask myself, did she keep the lights off so she could see clearly out the window to spot whose car I got out of? The day I was secretly on the phone with Harper in the house, my wife was in the kitchen with her back turned cooking. As soon as I hung up, she brought out a tray and said calmly, "Eat before it gets cold." I assumed she hadn't heard a thing. Now I ask myself, was she listening to every word, pressing the record button the moment I started talking? For 3 years, she never showed jealousy, never got angry, never threw a fit. I thought it was the ultimate virtue of a devoted woman. Now I ask myself, does a person who can endure 3 years of blatant betrayal without a single word of resentment actually exist? Or was it the chilling patience of an apex predator waiting to become the final victor? On the rare occasions we ate together, she would sit across from me, serve my food, and silently observe my face. I thought it was just affectionate attention. Now I ask myself, was she meticulously dissecting my expressions, my laugh, my speech patterns? Was she mapping the micro-expressions on my face so she could tell exactly when I was lying and when I was telling the truth? 2 years ago, the last time we went to the movies, she stared at the screen while my mind was entirely focused on Harper. After the movie, she asked if it was good, and I said, "Yeah, it was great." She smiled brightly. Now I ask myself, did she know I hadn't watched a single second of the film? Was that smile mocking my lie? Or was it the confident smile of a woman who knew I was forever trapped in the palm of her hand? For 3 years, I never asked what her favorite food was, what music she liked, or where she wanted to travel. I knew absolutely nothing. All I knew was that she cooked well, cleaned well, and never bothered me. Now I ask myself, is a person with no hobbies, no desires, and no emotional outbursts normal? Or was it an immaculate camouflage entirely erasing her own identity to become the perfect observer? One more trivial memory resurfaced. I once caught her reading a book on criminal psychology. When I asked why she was reading it, she said it was just interesting. I chuckled, thinking she had a quirky hobby, and she laughed with me. Now I ask myself, was she trying to understand me, or was she looking for the perfect psychological blueprint to destroy me? I looked around the house again. Every corner, every object, the dining table we ate at every day. The entire place was an intricate spiderweb. The vials in the cabinet, the journal in the drawer, the cameras in the living room, everything was perfectly placed. And I, who thought I was the hunter, was nothing but a fat fly trapped in the web from the very beginning. She was right. I thought I was playing chess and controlling the board. But she had called checkmate 2 years ago. I was just a useless piece left on the board until she decided to deliver the killing blow. Now that the play is over, I am forced to confront the delusions of the past 3 years. 3 years of acting like a king. 3 years of looking down on my silent wife. I learned a lesson that has been burned into my very soul. Never ever underestimate the silence of a quiet person, because the moment they finally open their mouths to break that silence, you won't even have the chance to make an excuse. I looked at the kitchen, her slouched back, the woman washing dishes in silence with her hair tied up. On the surface, she looks like an ordinary housewife, but I now know the chilling abyss she harbors inside. I asked myself over the last 3 years as I lied as easily as I breathed, came home reeking of another woman's perfume, and slept soundly as if nothing was wrong. What was she thinking as she watched me? Did she ever want to strangle me in my sleep? Or did she just smile quietly in the dark, thinking, go ahead, enjoy it while it lasts? I'll show you hell soon enough. I didn't know, and I didn't have the courage to ask. That night, I sat in the living room until late. My wife washed the dishes, wiped the table, and put everything away. It was the same familiar sounds of domestic life I had heard for 3 years. But tonight, every clink of the plates felt like a knife stabbing into my chest. When she walked out of the kitchen, I was still sitting on the couch. She looked at me surprised. You aren't asleep yet? I shook my head and spoke in a terribly voice. Can we sit down and talk for a minute? She stared at me for a moment, then nodded and sat in the chair across from me. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and looked down at the floor. A heavy silence filled the room. I looked at her. It was the first time I had ever observed her so closely for so long. Her long hair, her clean features, and her hands rough and calloused from washing dishes every day. In 3 years, I had never once held those hands properly. Finally, I spoke. Why? Why didn't you do this sooner? Why didn't you throw a fit and tear the house apart? Why did you choose such a horrifying method? She slowly raised her head and looked at me. The mocking, venomous look from this morning was completely gone. In its place was a look of profound, bottomless sorrow. She spoke in a low voice. Do you think I never once considered just leaving you? I couldn't say anything. She continued. I thought about it countless times. Every night you didn't come home, I sat on this exact couch, staring out the window, asking myself, what am I doing here? Why am I enduring this humiliation? Why can't I just leave and let you and that woman do whatever you want? She lowered her head, gently tracing the armrest of the chair. There is a night I still can't forget. 2 years ago when you were out with her and came home at 3 a.m. I hid in the dark kitchen and cried like I was losing my mind. I wailed and I swore to myself, this is it. Tomorrow morning, I am packing my bags and leaving this house. The next morning, I woke up early and shoved all my clothes into a suitcase. I held my breath. When she looked up, her eyes were rimmed with red. But when I went to open the front door to leave, I looked back at the kitchen. The empty fridge, the cold stove, the empty bowl you left on the table the night before. Suddenly, I thought, if I leave, who is going to cook for him? Who is going to iron his shirts and clean the house? What will he do when he gets hungry? I realized how pathetic I was. Even after being treated like absolute garbage, I was still worrying about what you were going to eat. I was so pathetic. Her voice cracked. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but my throat tightened so painfully I couldn't make a sound. She took a deep breath and went on. In the end, I unpacked the suitcase. I couldn't leave. No matter how much like trash you treated me, I loved you. If I walked out that door, I knew I would never see you again. And I didn't have the confidence to survive that. I dropped my head in shame, but at the same time, I realized something else. I couldn't keep living like an invisible ghost. I couldn't just stand by silently while my husband kissed another woman and treated me like I didn't exist in my own home. I had to do something. I had to make you see me no matter what it took, no matter what the cost was. I shot my head up. Is that why you came up with this horrifying plan? She nodded. I wasn't trying to get revenge. I just wanted you to look me in the eye. My father told me something a long time ago. He said, when people treat you like you are invisible, screaming, crying, and begging them to look at you does absolutely nothing. You just shut your mouth and wait quietly. You wait until they make a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. And then when they finally turn around, you make them feel in their bones exactly how arrogant and delusional they were. I stared at her completely stunned. She smiled faintly, a terribly sad smile. I never had the slightest intention of physically hurting you or that young girl. I just wanted to prove that I was not some incompetent, invisible shadow hiding in the house. I wanted to prove that I was fully capable of plotting something so terrifying you couldn't even fathom it. And ultimately, I succeeded. A single tear slipped from her eye and rolled down her cheek. But I almost gave up so many times when you walked through the front door with that happy glowing smile. And I knew it wasn't for me. When I heard you whispering sweet things to her on the phone out on the balcony, I screamed inside my own head. What the hell kind of glory am I expecting to achieve by doing this? What am I waiting for? And then, like a machine, I would walk back into the kitchen, wipe my tears, cook your rice, and mop the kitchen floor. I asked in a voice barely above a whisper. During those times, didn't you hate me enough to want to kill me? She looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Yes, I hated you. I hated you so much it gave me goosebumps and I was disgusted by you. I wanted to scream and smash every single thing in this house. But I swallowed it down because if I lost my mind and threw a fit, you would just write me off as your crazy jealous wife and that would be the end of it. I wanted you to see me as an object of pure terror. I wanted you to be afraid of me down to your marrow. That is why I bit my tongue and stayed silent. She paused for a moment and wiped her tears with her sleeve. Then she added in a much calmer voice. The night you decided to bring her into our house, I collapsed on the kitchen floor that afternoon and wailed like a wounded animal. While I was prepping the food that you and she were going to eat, my tears kept dropping into the boiling pot. I asked myself hundreds, thousands of times, do I really have to go this far? But I knew this was my last chance. If I didn't play my final card right then, I would live as your invisible ghost forever, and eventually I would be discarded. So, I hardened my heart. I stared at her. For the first time in 3 years, I realized she was an incredibly fragile, broken human being. She wasn't a cold-blooded psychopath. She hurt as if she had been stabbed. She cried until she couldn't breathe, and she wanted to give up. But instead of running away, she chose to stay by my side, chose to love me, and chose to turn herself into a monster just to make me look back at her. I asked carefully, do you regret how this turned out? She stared into space for a while before slowly shaking her head. No, I don't regret it. I'm just sad that I had to use such a horrific extreme method. I wanted you to see me from day one for 3 years. I just wanted you to ask me just once. Truly just once. How was your day? Are you tired? But you didn't say it right up until the very end. I had no words because she was 100% right. I never asked how she was doing. The only things I ever asked her were garbage questions about food, money, or my own schedule. I never once showed a shred of curiosity about Clara as a human being. She stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the pitch-black night sky. Her slouched back and long hair looked incredibly fragile. She spoke in a voice that sounded like it was coming from far away. Do you know? Some nights I would stay awake just watching you sleep so soundly. I would wonder, are you dreaming about me or are you holding her in your dreams? And then I would feel so miserable and pathetic. I wanted to throw up, sticking around a man who doesn't even love me. But I knew I couldn't live like that forever. I had to put an end to it somehow. And this is the method I chose to permanently burn exactly who I am into your brain. To force you to finally look at me. Truly look at me, for the first time in 3 years. I slowly stood up and walked up behind her. I wanted to reach out and pull her narrow shoulders into a hug, but my hands stopped in midair and dropped back to my sides. I didn't have the right to do that. I just stood behind her and choked out a single word. I'm sorry. She slowly turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were brimming with tears, but a very faint, light smile played on her lips. What are you sorry for? For cheating on me? For bringing your mistress to our bedroom door? Or for treating me like a ghost? For 3 years? I couldn't answer, she added quietly. You don't need to apologize. I just need you to know this one thing. That I was here. That for the last 3 years without missing a single day, I was in this house cooking your food, cleaning up after you, waiting for you, and loving you so much. It drove me insane. Now that you finally understand that, I am satisfied. She turned and walked toward the bedroom. With her hand on the doorknob, she looked back slightly and said in a low voice, Go to sleep. I'll make you some really delicious new side dishes tomorrow morning. With the soft click of the door closing, I was left alone in the middle of the living room. I looked around the house. The space I was so familiar with suddenly felt like a strange alien planet I was seeing for the first time. I looked up at the ceiling. Somewhere up there she had hidden a camera. I looked toward the kitchen. I could see the phantom image of her back weeping silently as she cooked alone. I looked at the empty couch. I could see the spot where she fought a crushing loneliness every night waiting for me. And then I realized I had never truly opened my eyes in this house. I collapsed onto the sofa and buried my face in my hands. Hot tears began to pour through my fingers uncontrollably. Tears of absolute remorse for my foolish, arrogant past. Tears for the 3 years I had thrown into the void. And tears for the woman who was currently lying on the other side of that door. A pitiful woman who loved me so much. She willingly walked into the fires of hell and turned herself into a terrifying monster. I don't know if I deserved to be forgiven. But one thing was certain. I was face to face with the most cruel and terrifying person in the world. Not because she was evil, But because the weight of her love and patience for me was so massive, I couldn't bear it. I woke up late the next morning. Breakfast was already set on the table, but there was only one plate, one set of silverware. My wife was sitting in the chair across from it, looking out the window, but when she heard me come out, she turned and smiled. "You're awake? Eat." I sat down and picked up my spoon, but I couldn't scoop any food. I looked at her and asked, "About the divorce? What happens to us now?" She stared at me for a moment before speaking calmly. "You signed the agreement. I'll file the paperwork with the court by the end of this week. As agreed, I'll take 80% of our joint assets. I'll leave the house in your name, but you need to buy out my equity in cash within 6 months. Whether you sell the house or take out a loan is up to you." The silence in the room was deafening. Her voice was as dry and cold as if she were reading someone else's itinerary. "I'm going to move back to Pennsylvania to stay with my mom for a while. My dad left behind a lot of herbal formulas, so I'm thinking about opening a small apothecary. I'll make a living somehow, so don't worry about me." I asked in a trembling voice, "And what about me?" Her gaze dropped. "Entirely indifferent. How you live your life is up to you. You can go to Harper, beg for her forgiveness, and try to start over. But honestly, I highly doubt that young girl is ever coming back to you after this whole ordeal. She's probably incredibly traumatized." I bit my lip hard. She added, "I won't say a word to your company or your friends. I'm not going to leak those files so you can go to work with peace of mind. I don't have the slightest desire to drag your life through the mud. I just wanted you to know exactly who I am." I stared at her. For the first time in my life, she looked incredibly beautiful and regal. Not a flashy, superficial beauty, but a transparent, unshakable peace that only belongs to someone who has weathered every storm and let go of all earthly attachments. She was glowing. I asked, "Do you resent me?" She shook her head. "No, I don't hold any grudges anymore. I'm just tired. I'm tired because I loved you too much. I'm tired because I waited too long, and I'm tired of orchestrating this entire performance." She stood up and went into the bedroom. A few minutes later, she rolled out a small carry-on suitcase. She opened the closet, took out a few simple plain outfits she usually wore, and packed them neatly. Watching her slow, peaceful movements, my chest burned as if it were being slashed open with shards of broken glass. In 3 years, I had never once seen my wife pack a bag for a trip, because she had never prepared to go anywhere. She had always guarded the house, always waited for me, and now she was preparing to leave. I sprang up like a coiled spring and rushed over to her. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Zipping up the suitcase, she shook her head. "No, I can do it myself." With her bag packed, she stood up straight and slowly looked around the house for a very long time. The large bed in the master bedroom, the vanity, and our massive wedding portrait hanging on the living room wall. After resting her eyes there for a moment, she turned her head away without lingering attachment. I said desperately, "I'm sorry. I know that anything I say now sounds like a useless excuse, but I am truly incredibly sorry." She stopped walking and looked straight at me. "What are you sorry for? Cheating on me or not loving me?" My mouth froze. I couldn't answer. She smiled faintly and said, "If you are apologizing for cheating on me, I will accept it. But if you are apologizing for not loving me, there is no need. The human heart isn't something you can control just by trying hard." She grabbed the handle of her suitcase and headed for the front door. Like a condemned sinner, I kept my head down and trudged behind her. The electronic lock beeped and blinding morning sunlight flooded the entryway, illuminating her hair. Stepping over the threshold, she turned back to look at me one last time. "Don't skip meals and take care of your health. Cut back on the drinking. And remember this, if another woman ever cooks a warm meal for you in the future, truly look at her. Don't treat her like she is invisible. Look deep into her eyes. Don't turn her into a dark shadow like you did to me." She turned around and walked away. I stood blankly in the doorway, staring endlessly at her retreating figure. The sound of her suitcase wheels clattering against the asphalt echoed loudly down the street. A woman who had dedicated 3 years of her life to this house, leaving with nothing but a small carry-on bag. A woman who was walking away, shaking off her scarred past, leaving behind a husband who had never even treated her like a human being. I walked back into the empty house. The silence was deafening. On the dining table, the single bowl of rice she had made for me was growing cold. The simmering pot roast, the perfectly rolled omelet, the neat side dishes, all my absolute favorites made by her hands. I asked myself for the past 3 years, making sure dinner was ready at the exact same time every single day. Who was she doing that for? For me? To protect our marriage? Or for herself? I slumped into the dining chair and picked up my chopsticks. I picked up a cold piece of meat and put it in my mouth. It tasted slightly off, the texture dry, but I forced myself to chew and swallow. Tears spilled from my eyes relentlessly, dropping into my bowl. I cried, cursing my own cowardly, foolish self. I sobbed for the 3 irretrievable years I had wasted. I wailed in grief over losing the woman who had loved me more than anyone else in the world, who had just exited my life forever. A few days later, I got a text from Harper. "Hey, I'm feeling a lot better and I've settled back in at my parents' place. I am so sorry for ruining your marriage. I don't think I'll ever come back to Chicago again. Take care." I read the message and quietly deleted her contact. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say and no reason to ever speak to her again. Work was as busy as ever. My colleagues still joked around and everything in my surroundings was astonishingly normal. Everything except me. Every day when I came home to a dark, empty house, a bone-chilling loneliness would suffocate me. I tried cooking for myself, but I could never replicate the taste of her food. I vacuumed and did the laundry, but the house felt like a sterile freezer, devoid of all warmth and scent. Whenever I asked myself what I had lost, the answer was always the same. Everything. Months later, an envelope arrived in the mail from the court. It was the final divorce decree. As agreed, the assets were split, and I had 6 months to wire a staggering amount of money to her account. I accepted it without a single complaint. I had no right to fight it. Sitting on the empty living room sofa, I stared blankly out the window. The setting sun cast an orange glow across the floor. This lazy afternoon scenery felt so familiar. At this exact time, my wife used to sit on this couch reading a book or watching TV. When she heard the electronic lock beep as I came in, she would stand up and ask, "Have you had dinner?" I would give a half-hearted nod and slip right into the bedroom. Right now, if someone were to just ask me that mundane question, "Have you had dinner?" I would give anything. But the only thing echoing in the house is a suffocating silence. I looked up at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall. The young man and woman in the picture were smiling brightly, holding hands as if they owned the world. My wife in her white dress, me in my black tux. We had exchanged vows to stay together until our hair turned gray. 3 years later, those vows turned to ash and scattered to the wind. Not because she broke the promise, but because I had shredded it to pieces a long time ago. If I were given the chance to turn back time, would I live differently? The answer is yes. I would look deeply into her eyes. I would ask her how her day was and if she was feeling okay. Before falling asleep, I would pull her close and hug her tight. I would tell her I love her and thank her for being by my side every single day. But that chance is gone forever. My wife left, and I am left alone, paying the highest tuition fee of my life, a debt I will never fully pay off. I don't know if I am the kind of person who deserves forgiveness, but I know I have to keep living. I will have to carry this horrifying guilt, this regret, and these burning scars like a medal on my chest for the rest of my life. I can only vaguely hope that someday in the distant future, a day will come when I can look back on the past without crying. I stood up and trudged into the kitchen. I opened the fridge and pulled out some wilted vegetables and a piece of meat as I prepared a pathetic meal for one. A thought crossed my mind. In the dim light of dawn, standing in the kitchen for 3 years, cooking a meal every single day without fail, who was she cooking for with such profound devotion? The answer arriving far too late strikes my heart. She was cooking for love. A love so massive and heavy I didn't even deserve to receive it. Now that the storm has passed and only ruins remain, I sit quietly and chew on the memories of the past. Not to resent anyone or to blame myself. I just want to understand my wife, myself, and the true weight of the institution of marriage. I learned the most profound chilling lesson of my life. Never underestimate the silence of someone who loves you. I thought my wife's silence was just weakness, submission, and ignorance. I was completely wrong. Silence can sometimes be a terrifying endurance, a razor-sharp period of waiting, a meticulous calculation. And in that deep silence, fueled by murderous intent or profound love, a person can become hundreds of times stronger than you could ever imagine. My wife stayed silent for 3 years. The 3 years I cheated. The 3 years I audaciously brought another woman to our driveway. The 3 years I treated her like a ghost. She didn't shed a single tear in front of me. She didn't get angry and she didn't scream. She remained as silent as the dead. And in that silence, she methodically collected the evidence of my infidelity, screenshotting WhatsApp messages and recording phone calls one by one. She dug a flawless trap and waited for the most lethal timing. When she finally made her move, it wasn't loud or barbaric, but it struck with 100% accuracy and absolute destructive power. The second lesson: betrayal doesn't just break trust. It actively mutates a human soul into a completely different monster. I turned my wife into a monster. The pure, innocent woman who worshipped her husband and devoted her life to him. I turned her into a chilling architect who mixed toxic botanicals, installed hidden cameras, and slowly tightened a noose around my neck and my mistress's neck. It wasn't because she was inherently evil. It was because I pushed her to the absolute edge of a cliff. I trampled her pure love into a bloody pulp, and she sharpened that agony into a blade and aimed it at my throat. I think about the meals she cooked for me every day, the impeccable timing, the nutritious menus, all my favorite dishes. I thought it was just her duty as a wife, just a part of her household chores. But now I understand that was love. A love so quiet and enduring I didn't even notice it. And by the time I realized it, everything had already burned to the ground. There is one lingering image that refuses to leave my mind. At 3 a.m., curled up on the dark kitchen floor, swallowing her sobs as she cried, and then wiping her tears, standing back up, and silently simmering broth to cure the hangover of the husband who had just come home from rolling around with another woman. What kept her anchored in that corner of a hellish house? Why couldn't she just throw the divorce papers at my face and run? The only answer I can find is blind love. A love so vast and undeserved, it was completely wasted on a piece of garbage like me. Now left utterly alone in an empty house, I finally realize in my bones just how immense the value of those trivial daily moments really was. The steam rising from a bowl of hot rice. The gentle greeting of, "Have you had dinner?" When I got home from work. The warm smile welcoming me as I opened the front door. Those tiny fragments of life I took for granted like the air I breathe. I miss them so desperately it physically hurts. Even when I try to cook for myself, it tastes like chewing on sand. When I clean, the house feels like a morgue that has lost all its warmth. If I ask out loud, "Have you had dinner?" no one answers. The third lesson. In a marriage, maintaining the most boring, mundane routine is actually the greatest, most miraculous achievement in the world. My wife woke up every morning to cook rice, run the vacuum, and wait for me to come home, a dry, repetitive life with no fiery romance and no cinematic events. But to quietly protect that boring routine requires an unimaginably massive amount of love and patience, not flashy words of affection or expensive designer bags, but the quiet devotion of someone who simply stays by your side without a word of complaint. Looking out the window, I can see the lights glowing in the apartment building across the street. Ordinary people building their homes and living their lives, making dinner, laughing at the TV, sometimes raising their voices in arguments, and sulking just normal couples. Among the countless husbands and wives living under those lights, how many of them truly appreciate the ordinary devotion of the person next to them? How many of them look their spouse in the eye? Could it be that someone out there is just like me, only realizing it and crying tears of blood after they've lost everything and are left sitting in a pile of ashes? The reason I am writing this shameful, humiliating confession is not to preach to you or give some grand speech. I have absolutely zero right to do that. I just wanted to share the blood-soaked lessons I learned from my own horrifying arrogance and irreversible mistakes. If anyone reading this is feeling bored or stagnant in their marriage, please right now turn your head and look at your spouse sitting next to you or cooking in the kitchen. Look at them and with total sincerity ask them just one thing. Did anything happen today? You did great today. And please truly listen to their answer. Because in every household in the world, there is always someone silently grinding themselves down to the bone for their family. Someone who remains silent even while in pain. Who remains silent because they love you. Who sacrifices themselves for the peace of the household. If you do not recognize their festering wounds in time, one day that person will vanish into an eternal silence, and you will be left with nothing but a freezing empty house and a regret that will chain you down for the rest of your life. My wife's final plea before she left the house still echoes in my ears. Take care of your health, and if someone ever cooks a warm meal for you, don't treat them like they are invisible. Truly look at them. Now I finally understand what those words meant. It meant don't just look with your eyes. Feel it with your heart. The unspoken devotion. The unexpressed love. Read the heartbreaking endurance of a person who suffers day in and day out just to protect the family. My wife protected the dying embers of this household all by herself for 3 years, knowing the fire was eventually going to go out in the darkness where no one acknowledged her. She breathed life into those embers every single day to keep them alive. And the moment she finally stopped breathing life into them, the flames flared up one last time, and then turned into a pile of cold ash. I sit blankly in front of that pile of ash, missing the diamond-like love that I kicked away with my own 2 feet. I am nothing but a fool. I don't know how my wife is doing now. She probably opened that small apothecary in Pennsylvania, regained her peace of mind, and is living a vibrant new life. Every evening on my way home from work, I look up at the red sunset and whisper to myself, if I was given just one more chance, I would give you my everything and love you until it hurt. But there are no more chances for me. Life is a series of choices, and now we are both paying the price for our choices. My wife gained her freedom, liberated from a horrifying prison, and I gained a bone, chilling loneliness and a guilt I will have to carry until the day I die. If you are reading this right now, look around you. Capture the person closest to you in your eyes. Just because they are quiet doesn't mean they have nothing to say or nothing on their mind. Ask how they are doing. Listen to their heart and cherish and love them like crazy before it is too late. I am still left here in this empty house sitting at the dining table where I used to face my wife in this wretched chair. Every night when I open the door and walk into the pitch-black house, I reflexively look toward the kitchen expecting the smell of a simmering pot roast. Sometimes, like a madman, I try preparing dinner for myself. Mimicking the taste of her cooking, I slow cook a roast, glazed pork chops, and blanch green beans. Like a habit, I set 2 plates and 2 sets of silverware on the table. I sit down and stare blankly at the empty chair across from me. I wonder to myself, what are you having for dinner tonight? Is there someone gently asking you if you've eaten? Sometimes when the pain is too unbearable, I send her a text. Just a short message asking how she is doing. She replies with a very polite robotic tone. Yes, I am doing well. Thank you. That single line is all I get. I know very well. The warmest door in the world, which used to be open exclusively for me, is now locked tight, and I don't even have the right to knock on it anymore. As I put a period at the end of this story, the memory of that day 2 years ago flashes in my mind the day I grabbed Harper's hand and rushed into the ER. Harper's cold, pale, terrified hand. I didn't know that holding that hand, stained with lies, deceit, and lust, would be the trigger that led my entire life to ruin. After that day, my small, fragile universe shattered into microscopic pieces. If my story makes you think of someone who silently devotes themselves to you like a shadow every day, someone who cleans without a word of complaint, cooks warm meals, and worries if you're hungry, please just stop what you are doing for 1 minute. Go to that person, look them sincerely in the eyes, and say just one thing. Was today hard? Thank you so much for being by my side. And then listen to their answer with your entire heart and soul, because the quietest, most tight-lipped person in the world might actually be the one waiting most desperately for someone to finally notice they exist. Thank you for reading this pathetic confession all the way to the end. I pray that you will be grateful every single day for the most ordinary, mundane miracles, breathing life into your daily routine, losing everything and being covered in ash before finally realizing its value. That kind of staggering stupidity is enough for just me. Oh, and if I may add one last thing, she really did make the most perfect dinner every single night at exactly 6 p.m., without a second of delay. I just wonder what exactly was she counting down.